The goal here is feed 9 billion people by 2050. And I'm going to ask each of you how, if at all, you are tackling that problem, starting with Chris.
So I believe that as a chef, and that's been my background all my life, 15 years in the industry, that the system that I use in restaurants doesn't quite work for the global scheme of things. So I wanted to use my skill sets with Hampton Creek to create something a little better. So we look at products, especially commercially based products, that have unsustainable ingredients. As she mentioned, Just Mayo, one of our first products out. We removed the eggs from that system. And yes, that's not a new idea. People have done that before, but people haven't done it in the scheme of mainstream. It's always been viewed to the 3% of the population that really is looking at vegetables as their main source of ingredients. But we wanted to look at this as, how do we attack this problem that we see within the food system on that grand level, on the shelves of the supermarkets? Because I don't think for the next 50 years that we're not going to have mayo on the shelves, but how can we make it a cleaner product? Another product that we have is a cookie that we did remove eggs again. So we develop a system using bioengineers and biotechnicians and informatics and look at the whole plant database across the world, scanning plants to find if they have certain applicable abilities. So can it bind oil and water together? Can it potentially put water and flour together? And all these are kind of in conjunction with how do we make the system just a little bit better. So from Hampton Creek's perspective, we really look at fighting the commercial battle in a sustainable way and making it affordable. All of our products are always cheaper than what's the status quo out there, and honestly, they're a little bit better.
All right, Emily?
Well, after graduating from college, I spent some time overseas in West Africa, and my curiosity was piqued about the global food system. I came back to DC, got my master's at American University, started learning about the food system in more depth, became a lot more confused than I had been. I attended a lot of sessions like this, and I thought to myself, where are the farmers? I feel like at topics, sessions like this, there aren't many farmers' voices. We hear from policymakers, we hear from academics, we hear from writers, and I think that's great. But I wanted to learn what it was like to be a farmer, so I got a job at New Morning Farm. I thought I would only be there for 6 months, and I turned out to love it, and I've been there since. That's 2.5 years ago. So I feel like my part in tackling this big issue is that I want to change myself and change where I live before I can go out and try and change someplace that I don't know about.
And you, Trent?
To quote Jack Bobo at the State Department, the greatest challenge that we are faced with in agriculture in feeding this 9 billion people by 2050 is trying to figure out how to produce more food with less land, less water, less fertilizer, and less pesticide. Basically, to sum that up from a business standpoint, is how do we make agriculture more efficient, more productive? And I think there's two ways in which, there's two components to that. The first is science. We need improved technology and improved methodology that lead to a more efficient agriculture system. But second, and equally as important, is the adoption of that technology and methodology by farmers. We figured out how to get farmers to adopt technology in this country and methodology in this country over 100 years ago. We had developed land-grant institutions that had created new science, new technologies in agriculture, and then the Extension Service came along several decades after that, about 60 years after that, to extend the knowledge that was being created at these research stations and land-grant institutions. But what we found out was that farmers really didn't care what the extension agent had to say. And as one extension agent in West Texas put it, if you can't teach an old dog new tricks, next year I'll start with the pups. And so he began forming, as many extension agents around the country began forming, tomato clubs and corn clubs. And this led to 4-H clubs. A few decades after that, we created vocational agricultural education in the United States in secondary schools, which the Future Farmers of America was a result. And what we began to see was that we could transfer technology and methodology through youth to adults. Young people are early adopters of technology, whether that is an iPhone, whether that's Facebook, or whether that is a new seed variety. And I've created an organization called AgriCorps that is based on this concept. And it takes American agriculture volunteers to the developing world to teach agriculture in high schools, using the 4-H program and agricultural education in those countries to transfer this technology through youth to their adult farming parents and farming populations.
So talking about new skills for a second, whether you're in the lab, on the farm, in the kitchen, what are the new skills that are needed in food production?
I mean, I think open-mindedness. I think that's one of the biggest things. We all have to be kind of open to the idea that food is going to change. It's going to be different. We can't control that, and the way we've done it the last 150 years isn't quite the best way. You know, I look at, you know, my forefathers, Escoffier, who, you know, basically wrote the first cookbook, and kind of off of his teachings, we've all kind of developed these recipes, but it's been stagnant. We really haven't changed too much besides of the 1%. You think of El Bulli, you think of Alinea, you think of Moto, those restaurants where people are paying a lot of money to see new technologies with food. But when you're talking about mainstream, has it really changed? I go to a manufacturing facility where I'm seeing 1,000-pound totes full of yellow goo that they're pumping into sauces and dressings and going, wow, how do we get to this point and how can we change it? So I think the new technologies, there has to be a willingness to change, a willingness to learn.
And Trent, can I just ask you, your family owns a ranch in West Texas.
Yes, ma'am.
What's the difference between your grandfather's ranch and the one you work on today in terms of the skill levels that are required?
So the livestock industry has grown tremendously in technology. We have differentiated ourselves within the industry. We have cow-calf operations, feeding operations, seed stock operations. Seed stock operations are using high technology of embryo transfer and artificial insemination to be able to produce the most beef with the least resources. So I think just the improvement of genetics, the improvement of science and be able to eradicate disease has revolutionized the livestock industry from a beef cattle producer perspective.
So I want to talk a little bit about getting young people excited here. Just to set up the sort of challenge, what are the barriers for young people? Let me start with Emily. For young people who are interested in farming and/or food production, sort of broadly.
So I think there's 4 big problems as I see it. One is that it's really difficult for a young farmer who doesn't come from family money or family land to make a living in this country. I couldn't do it. I get paid a salary, my room and board's included. I have for a farm, a generous compensation package, but I guarantee you it is nowhere near what anyone else in this room is making. It's a struggle. Imagine having a family and trying to make a living as a farmer who doesn't come from money. Number 2 is land. It goes hand in hand with the making a living question. It's very difficult to get access to land in this country. It's very expensive because of land speculation, Wall Street investing. We need more programs dedicated to helping young and new farmers get land. The third is a culture issue. I feel we haven't really talked about culture at this event very much, but our culture, as I see it at least, places a higher value on profit than on people. If someone's a hardworking person, why would they choose to work on a farm when they can make a lot more money and live a lot more easily doing another job, like as an academic or anything else really? And the fourth is rural issues. Where I live in central Pennsylvania, the school districts are horrible. You have to drive very far to get medical care. There's not very many cultural events within an hour's drive. It can be really difficult, and I lived in DC, I've lived in towns, and there's very little around me where I live now.
Do you want to comment on that, Trent?
Yeah, I want to bring a different perspective internationally. I mean, I think that we're doing a lot of things in this country right, or working on that. Agricultural education, the FFA, 4-H, Extension are all working on that in this country. In other countries, we have a difficult time in attracting young people to agriculture. I took my first Corps during a pilot project in Liberia 2 years ago, and we were sitting in a Liberian senator's office, and I had all of my Corps members introduce themselves. All of my Corps members have an agriculture production background, and I had them describe that ag production background and the farm that they came from. And the senator stopped them halfway through. And again, these volunteers are about to go into schools to teach agriculture to young Liberians. And he stops them halfway through and says, wait a minute, you're all farmers? And they all say, yes, we come from all these diversified different types of agriculture operations in America. He says, you must tell the young people of this country that you're all farmers. They don't believe that Americans farm. And that was a very powerful moment for our entire team. As another friend put it in Liberia, Trent, we don't have farmers in this country, we have peasants. Farmers are in a totally separate category. It's a socioeconomic condition. It is not a career choice. In this country, you can be a farmer, you can be an accountant, or you can be a teacher. Over there, you're either homeless, a farmer, or you're rich. It's in that category. And so our goal in AgriCorps is to shift that paradigm from farmer equals peasant to farmer equals business person to make agriculture more attractive to young people and tying it directly to profits.
Yeah.
So you just went into, not to Liberia, they're in Ghana.
We're no longer in Liberia for certain circumstances. We are now in Ghana working with 4-H Ghana in that country.
And what are you hearing from Ghana in terms of these young kids, the people that they're working with?
So as we begin to utilize experiential learning, and the young people are beginning to have their own individual entrepreneurship agriculture projects, they begin to see that there is profit to be made in agriculture, and they begin to get excited. We've actually seen through some of our studies and research that young people, before we come, they have this idea that farming equals peasantry, and so they don't want to be a farmer. But as we begin to show them that actually there is money to be made in agriculture, it develops their interest in the industry.
I'm going to see if there's a question from the audience in a second, but I want to have Chris and Emily comment on something. There's a big emphasis here in the U.S. on science and technology and STEM education. Do you think that how can agriculture and food production be better brought into the fold? I mean, should food production be taught like algebra and physics? I mean, how do we sort of get more young people at least on the radar?
Yeah, I mean, again, education is the biggest thing that we can do. Starts in the school, starts in the lunch cafeteria, ends at home. Parents and brothers and siblings and whoever else is taking care of whoever else is taking care of whoever else. All of us need to start thinking of food as medicine, and to start thinking of, how can we teach that, instead of drinking a Coca-Cola, you have a delicious apple. From my perspective, all of that will kind of open up all the gates for everyone to start thinking of the science of actual food. And not just eating it and consuming it, but what actually goes into growing it, into making it, into teaching other people how to do that and do it correctly. So from my perspective, having worked with so many farmers, so many wonderful farmers at the restaurants that I was at, and seeing how it was done, it was a beautiful experience for me. But I wish I could share that with everyone. I wish I could just open up my head and let them see the farms and see what's going on and see all the great work that you all are doing.
Thanks. So I want to highlight a great program that's happening here in DC. It's through the Fresh Farm Markets. It's the Food Prints program. We work with them a little bit. We have a market at the Watkins School. And that school in particular, they do a food lab. They have a school garden. It's an elementary school, so kids from very young up until they're finished there, they learn how to grow food. We supply that garden sometimes with some seedlings that we don't need. They plant them, they watch them grow, and then they learn how to cook with those items. And I think that sort of education, like a home ec type of thing, would be really valuable to expand to all elementary schools here so that kids know that their food comes from the ground and not from the grocery store.
And that I'm sorry, I don't. I totally agree. I mean, I have a little girl. She's 3.5 now, and I've been teaching her how to cook since she's been 1. Literally in the kitchen with me, and she'll shuck my peas and she'll cut my green beans, and because we see it from the farmer's market to our kitchen, I let her pick out her vegetables, then we put it on the table. She eats it, and it's not big. Picky eaters. All kids are a little bit of a picky eater, but when it comes from their hand and they can actually feel and touch it, it's something romantic about it happens, and they start to really enjoy the food.
And if I can just throw out that we are doing a lot of these things. There are 610,000 students studying agriculture education in high school right now, and that are members of the FFA, the Future Farmers of America. That's at an all-time high. over the 85 plus years of that organization's existence. So there are young people who are interested in studying agriculture for the more than 300 career choices there are within the food and agriculture industry.
Yeah, everything sort of touches on it, whether you're interested in economy, you're interested in agriculture, you're interested in food, yeah. So making the jump from high school into choosing it as a career path, just sort of touching on what Emily was saying, Trent's family owns about 40 banks in West Texas and Oklahoma. The young farmers that come in there, what are they up against? What are they saying? What do they need? Yeah,
so I mean, most of our banks are agricultural lending firms, and the largest barrier, this has been mentioned earlier, but it's capital intensive, and unless you come from a farm background, it is almost prohibitive to be able to go in and buy land. So agriculture, where I come from, agriculture is much different than it is in California, than it is in the Midwest, than it is on the East Coast. Agriculture is localized, and no one can really make a living if they have to go out to purchase that land. They cannot pay for that in agriculture today. But if they have that land already in the family, they can go out and they can make a nice living, and hopefully their wife or husband is also a school teacher to help support them in the process.
So what can be done? I mean, what do young farmers in particular need from the federal? Let's start with the federal government. What can be done?
I think continuing to promote agricultural education, showing the wide spectrum of what agriculture offers in a career choice. I mean, we have a chef on stage, and he is part of the agriculture industry, and we need to make sure that we are drawing all of these connections to young people in rural communities, in urban environments, that agriculture is an extremely broad and diverse industry that touches and affects every one of us. And we need to continue to promote that message more than just to farmers. Farmers organizations love to have, kind of self-therapy sessions where they're always talking to themselves, but we need to have farmers here, and we need to have people from an urban setting going to farmers organizations, and we need to open up this dialogue between rural and urban, farming and non-farming populations, because it affects all of us.
I'm going to go to Mary, because I said I was going to do it about 5 minutes ago. So for a question from the audience.
A small question and a bigger question. So some people on Twitter want to know, should we bring home ec back to high schools? Okay. And then the other question is, what about scholarships for the brightest minds, so that more young people, I mean, college is expensive, especially for really bright minds and innovation, could bring that youth power to aging farms?
Who wants to take that one?
I'd love to, actually. I'm a high school graduate. I never got the opportunity to go to college. I went right into the workforce as a dishwasher, and took that career that most chefs take, where they start at the bottom and work their way up. I would have loved to have had that opportunity. I went to home ec every semester in high school. I still had that program. Ms. Boardman was my teacher. And I had a passion for it since day one. And to be able to take that knowledge, and not just in the culinary aspect, but in a much more broad, where we're talking about technology within the cooking atmosphere. I've always been into being a cook that wants to do something for the first time ever. I think giving people that opportunity in whatever field it is, whether it's agriculture or even in the cooking community, it's just going to make the situation better for all of us.
Anybody else want to comment on that? Sort of getting the
yeah, as you said, there still are home economics departments in secondary schools. That's in many places it's called family and consumer sciences today.
So I just want to wrap up here with one last question for each of you. So Kathleen Merrigan, not today, but earlier, has said that the exciting thing about agriculture is that the future is unwritten. So I just want you each to sort of comment on that and how that can help. Well, just comment on it.
Well, from my perspective and for what we're doing at Hampton Creek, I love, as food tech grows and as we understand more of what these plants can do, to start working with the farmers. We're already starting to work with some sorghum farmers right now and developing products and working with them so they can get great prices for their crops. So we can continue to grow our ability to produce new foods in a more sustainable way. And I think that's directly linked to the farmers. And we talk about different crops that they could potentially grow and how the climate is changing. All of our systems that we're developing, the screening process we're going through, are all looking into plants that are going to be able to do that naturally. So kind of changing what we eat from the standpoint of the farmers themselves and what they're planting to what we're putting in the food is going to make a huge impact.
Yeah, I agree. Change what we eat. Here in DC, we bring our produce down through the winter. The produce is not nearly as exciting as in the summer, but it's still delicious and local. And I think that we need to keep that a focus. We need to learn how to eat in the seasons. That might mean we eat root vegetables for 4 or 5 months out of the year, but that is where we live.
Big high five on that one.
Yeah. I think we've talked about waste a little bit. We need to talk about eating some uglier produce at the market. We really struggle to sell things that look a little weird, so we don't bring it. And
so consumer behavior is like one of the hardest things to change. So
yes.
Any thoughts on that? How do we get?
We try. We don't have perfect standards. We don't try and make everything look perfect, but we try and sneak in some ugly ones, and often those are the ones that come back with us. And so try the ones that look a little weird. They will still taste great. I think also we need to protect our land. Land lost from farming is lost forever. So we need to put a hold on the development and the speculation. And we also need to help our young people. The National Young Farmers Coalition is starting a push today for public service loan forgiveness. And I think that would help a lot of people my age, younger, who want to go into farming and are saddled with student debt. So I think those are all pieces of the puzzle.
Future's unwritten. What do you see for young people?
So I want to comment on their comments, and where I agree domestically. Those are also very, and I don't mean this completely pejoratively, but elitist American responses whenever there are billions of people going hungry around the world who are just trying to get enough calorie intake to be able to have enough energy to go to the farm to produce more and make it through life. So as we are trying to solve American problems, we also have to look at the rest of the world. It is feeding the future, and it is at home, but it's also abroad. And we have to make sure that we do have enough food for people in West Africa, people in South Asia, people across the globe who don't have just the basic nutrition and caloric intake it takes to be able to survive and thrive. And in the 21st century, with the science and technology that we have a tremendous opportunity to be able to enhance their nutrition levels through agriculture. And as the creed from the Future Farmers of America says, in its very opening statement, I believe in the future of agriculture.